With regards to your faith, have you found yourself saying, I just know there has to be something more that I don't really understand? You need to stay tuned. Welcome to God Answers Prayer. I'm Linda Tiano, your host, and today we have a good story about how God is answering prayer. And I think you're going to be challenged. And let's go to the book of Psalms, chapter 91, verses 1 through 4. He who dwells in the shelter of Elyon will abide in the shadow of Shaddai. I will say of Adonai, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. For He will rescue you from the hunter's trap and from the deadly pestilence. He will cover you with His feathers, and under His wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness is our body armor and shield. Dinah Dye is a teacher who is called to help Christians understand their foundation in the Hebrew Scriptures and to help Jews understand the fulfillment of the Torah in Yeshua. We're going to be back with Dinah right after this. Well, welcome back. I'm here with Dinah Dye, and it's good to have you back.
Yes, it's good to be here.
It's been a while, and I was just thinking, because it has been a while, let's kind of revisit the past a little bit before we get, because you got a new book.
I do have a new book.
And it's exciting.
Yeah, it is, especially because it's finished.
But you grew up in a Jewish home.
Yeah, now we're really going back far. Yeah, so I grew up in Canada, and basically conservative Jewish home.
Mm-hmm.
In the early years, you know, my family went to synagogue on Shabbat, and I went to Hebrew school, and I went to an Orthodox Jewish summer camp. So I was infused with that world. And as I got older, my parents they stopped going, although we would go to synagogue for the high holidays, so Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and at Passover. But they sort of pulled away. But I was always fascinated. I kind of continued on the journey as best I could as a kid. Our main thing that I enjoyed was our Passovers at my grandfather's house. And that was where the family always gathered every year. And the connection, because the early Passovers I remember were like 1958, somewhere in there, and Israel's become a state only 10 years.
Right.
So, and my uncle would be there, my Uncle Max, he was a Holocaust survivor. And so that was sort of my first introduction with him. You know, he had the numbers tattooed on the inside of his hand, and I didn't really understand. And I'm not sure which camp he was in, and he was just this wonderful, jovial man, but yet you could tell he was damaged goods from all of the trauma that he experienced. But getting together as a family, the connection was always that Israel had just become a state once again, and we had family members that had moved to Israel, and that the Holocaust was kind of our connecting point. It wasn't so much the deliverance from Egypt, although that was the story that we told through the Passover, but the connection was always to the Holocaust because it was so raw and relatively recent.
Right.
So that was kind of the family dynamic.
Yeah.
But a very special, important time, and then lots of really good things were planted, in my life during those years, celebrating at my grandparents' house.
So you said something about, you after spending the aha moment, after being in the New Age movement for a number of
Oh,
years.
yeah. I was really in the New Age movement. I call myself the Wandering Jew. I'm actually thinking about writing a book called The Wandering Jew. It's just so lost in my head, like many, what is the purpose of life? What is the meaning? Why am I here? Asking all those questions. Now, in the 60s, it was a different environment because we're all hippies, right?
Right.
We're on the hippie trail. And you could sort of dive into all different kinds of philosophies and ideologies, et cetera. People in the U.S. getting caught up in the anti-war movement. I was in Canada, so that wasn't really first and foremost for us. But I was just sort of fascinated by all the different religions and how they thought. And so I was always looking for, how does this apply to me? How can I make it work for me? And it never could. Because it couldn't answer three things that I thought were important. That it would be the true message of whoever God was or whatever, it would be easy to understand. That was kind of my first thing. Like, I would read the Bhagavad Gitas or, ancient Sanskrit, or, I'd go read weird things like Gurdjieff and Madame Blavatsky, and I have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. So it needed to be easy to understand. And I also recognize that it should be for everyone. Like, it didn't make any sense to me that you would find some truth and would only be for a few, but it wouldn't be for all of humanity.
Very interesting.
That didn't make sense to me. So everything else was like these special little tribal groups. The information was for you, we four, no more kind of thing. And so I rejected it. And then the other component was that it needed to be based on love. And so what I saw in a lot of other religions, and we have to be careful in our own faith that things don't become legalistic and judgmental. And on the same side, we're not doormats, if you know what I mean. But the heartbeat of a true faith needed to extend mercy. So mercy was the center, in my mind, to a faith that showed, your God loves. And what's interesting, I've been teaching on the Sermon on the Mount again. And if you go through, we call them the Beatitudes, which it actually doesn't really translate. Usually says praiseworthy, oh, how happy is the man, But it actually means how honored is the one. So somebody is in an honored state. And I won't go into all of that. But in those 9 Beatitudes, I always look for centers. And the center of the 9 Beatitudes is, blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. And so that needed to be the heartbeat of whatever I thought was truth when I did finally figure it out. So that was a little bit of the journey there.
So somebody handed you a Bible, right?
Yes, I think it was in like 1979. And after going through all this stuff and reading, I was always a researcher. I always loved to research history, etc. But somebody handed me a Bible. And of course, I knew the Old Testament quite well, but I had never read the New Testament. And I'm about, 27, somewhere in there, which seems shocking, right? But I never read it. I had no idea. And I heard about it, someone named Jesus, who we call Yeshua in Hebrew. And I read the entire Bible cover to cover in about a week. And so when I got into the New Testament, and I got to the story in John about the woman caught in the act of adultery, let he who is without sin cast the first stone, that was like the moment. I just understood at that moment, this was the God who was merciful, who loved, who had a message for everyone, not just, a few. And that was a message that was easy to understand. So it kind of fit all the criteria. Now, the journey began after that, and I did end up in an Assemblies of God church and, all that sort of thing. But that was kind of the moment. And I should add, leading up to that moment, was my experience going to the Quinby Center in Alamogordo back in the 70s, where you got past life readings. Oh. I'm not advocating for that, but as a confused hippie, someone said, well, you could go down to the Quinby Center and you have your aura balanced, all your chakras and your energy centers, get them, and they'll do a past life reading for you. I thought, oh, cool. So I go down there. I think it's like August of '79, and this guy tells me that in my past life I was a disciple of Christ in Israel. And then I followed Peter and ended up in the catacombs in Rome. I'm like, how cool is that? So I needed to know more about who this Christ person was, right? I mean, I'd heard about Jesus. So I had gone, when I went back to Taos, which is where I was living, I went to the library and took out books trying to find out who Jesus was, and Paul and Peter, etc. So I had read those historical accounts so that when the Bible was handed to me, I read the whole thing. But I mean, is that like, I say that's God's joke. I mean, is that bizarre?
It is, totally.
Yeah.
So when did you begin to feel the pulling, after you came to the Lord, and like you said, you were in an Assembly of God church, but you were, did you still,
confused.
yeah, I mean, you knew that the feasts of Yahweh were still
well, yeah,
active
I saw no distinction between the New Testament and the Old Testament. And people don't recognize how much festival language is actually in the New Testament, especially the book of John. When you go through that book, you literally go through every feast in some way, shape, manner, or form, except for Yom Kippur and Purim, which is interesting because the word Purim is in HaKippurim, which is Yom Kippur. But that's another aside.
Yeah.
But you can Passover and Tabernacles, and there's elements of Rosh Hashanah in there. So the New Testament is just filled with this kind of language, and sometimes it's not overt, so we don't catch it. I think it's, is it in John, just escaped me at the moment, 4, where, 4 more months and then the harvest. Well, when you see that language of the harvest, you know that it's Feast of Tabernacles. So that takes us back to the woman at the well, which likely is at Shavuot. So it's you'd want to understand, well, Yeshua's meeting this woman at the well at Shavuot, which is kind of a harbinger reminding of us Ruth and the whole harvest thing. And then taking us to this season between Shavuot and Feast of Tabernacles. So all that kind of language, it was obvious to me, having grown up that way, but I could see that others, and they didn't really understand the festival. Like, what did it mean? What was the value? What was the purpose? How does Yeshua fulfill it? What is he trying to say through it?
Sabbath?
Yeah. What is any of this? So I didn't have a problem recognizing the language, and so then the Lord has always put me in a sea of Gentiles. So I set out to try to explain to those who are not Jewish what is going on here, and how, basically their connection to the scriptures is through Judaism, or through the Jewish people, I would be better said, in the first century. So then I've got to unravel all this and then try to show, okay, your foundation is actually the Tanakh, or the Old Testament, and the New Testament just built on that, and here's why. So
from Taos and teaching to Santa Fe and teaching, and now to Edgewood, but even beyond. I mean, now the Lord has expanded.
I've taught. I mean, I've taught in Singapore. I'm overseas in various places. I've found myself in unusual places teaching. The Lord has opened that up. Now things got more difficult with COVID, right? Everything kind of shut down. So I haven't traveled near as much since, but I've put all my energy into writing books, and then I do an online course from my first 3 books. I help people walk through the sort of ancient Near East culture and world, the world in which the Bible was written, to help them understand. Okay, what's going on here? Because there are many things in the Bible that make no sense. Let's be real. And if you are going to just be dogmatic and say, yeah, I get it, I don't know what to tell you, but you've got to put them back in their historical culture and time and language. And once you understand it, then you can move forward and begin to make an application in your life or the community in which you're a part of.
And it must be such a joy to see people awaken to that.
Oh, amen. Yeah, because it was a lonely journey back in the late 70s, let me tell you. I mean, there was Jews for Jesus, and they had their moments. They're a little odd on some things. And the Messianic movement was just sort of getting started. You had Lamb out from Pennsylvania, some of these early Israel's Hope, some of these early Messianic, what was the other one? I can't think of their name. But so there was something, but in northern New Mexico, there was nothing. So I didn't know where I fit. And it was very challenging, and nobody wanted to hear it. And I did struggle early on with pastors who didn't really want to hear this, were challenged by it. It didn't fit into their, Christian worldview, I guess.
Yeah, and yet in the mountains of northern New Mexico, there were those.
Oh, there were underground kind of
that came to know Yeshua.
Well, we had like Don Compton out of Shalom,
right,
Santa Fe, and then I was Andrew Bush was my pastor up in. And Andrew Shishkoff, who eventually moved to Israel, and now, I mean, he's got Tents of Mercy. Eitan he goes by the name Eitan, and he's been over there 30 years. So, but he was part of the mountains of northern New Mexico, Jewish man who ended up in Israel.
Amen. Well, let's pause for a minute, and I just want to encourage all of you that are listening, just continue to stay with us, because there's so much more that the Lord wants to pour into you today. And He wants to pour His love and His faithfulness. So stay with us. We'll be right back after this. Well, I'm back with Dinah Dye. And so we've already talked basically about your mission. It's obvious.
It has not changed.
Right. Yeah. So tell us, I know we're going to be talking more about this newer book. But you said the first 3 books, you have workbooks and teachings and things on those, because I think that's integral to even what you've done with this other.
Absolutely.
So tell us about those.
So, as you study and teach and, research, the journey changes. And early on, I did a lot of work in the festivals, trying to bring that message to quote the Gentiles who didn't understand it. But in that same way, as I began to teach that, I began to grow out of that as well. And one of the things, I'm thinking it's about 15 years now, that I just never saw in the scriptures until then, was this whole pattern of the temple, like the place of the presence of God. I didn't see it. And then suddenly I saw it, and I realized it was absolutely everywhere in every passage. I mean, we recognize the tabernacle and the temple, etc., but it's so much bigger than that. And really, the pattern in Genesis chapter 1 is a temple pattern. Creation is actually a temple, because God is creating this universe for the place of His presence. It fits all of the criteria of what a temple would be.
Right.
So as I began to realize, Noah's Ark actually fits the bill as a temple pattern. The tents of the patriarchs, where Abraham and sons dwelled. All of this had language, and of course the ultimate was the tabernacle in the wilderness with Moses. Moses ascends the mountain. God gives him the design and plan, services and rituals and everything that would go in it. And then the tabernacle is a replica of the mountain, which is speaking of the temple, but it becomes a mobile temple. So now you're moving the people, and God's presence is mobile, which in the end is really where God was going to take it for Christians, as we are a mobile temple, on the move, moving out to the 4 corners of the earth to bring the message that God, has won the victory against the battles, and we'll talk about that in the next segments. But the battles with chaos, or the chaos creatures, but He, as the warrior, has won the victory and defeated these chaos figures to give you a new life, that new creation life that only you could have if those enemies are gone. So as I began to see that, I started writing in that. The garden obviously is this just wonderful picture, the temple pattern, the presence of God. So the first book I wrote was The Temple Revealed in Creation, which is a hard thing to write about since nobody was there. It's like, okay. But it's quite scholarly. So it's maybe not for everybody, but to try to bring, what is the scholarship world seeing in this, and how do they put this together? So I did that one, and then after that, The Temple Revealed in the Garden, and showing the garden as a temple pattern. And there's just lots, that's a whole show in itself. And then the third one in the series is the temple revealed in Noah's Ark. And people just don't realize just how compelling that is.
Yeah.
That this ark that's got 3 levels, just like heaven, earth, and sea, just like the universe, and at the top level considered like the dormitory of the priest, Noah and family, and then the animals, and then the refuse in the bottom. You really have this imagery, and then it lands on a mountain, and then they come off the ark and build an altar. Like there's just so much pattern in there. And again, this idea of a mobile, it's moving on the seas, like the tabernacle moved kind of in the wilderness in the sand, if you will, and now the ark itself moves on the sea. So there's always this thing about a moving tabernacle, a moving place for the presence of God. It's not this one stationary place where everybody goes to, it's that it's moving out. So those were the 3 books. I kind of combined them together in a series, the Temple Revealed series, and then I wrote a course that encompasses all 3 books. It's a 12-week course, and it goes through the themes that are similar throughout the 3 books. Themes like I talk about the creation covenant, I talk about Eden as sacred space, I talk about life in the field, like the world, how does that work? I talk about kings, enthronement, rest, all these different ancient Near East topics. And so it's a 12-week course, and students take it, and hopefully they're better for it.
So a question, you mentioned the covenant.
Yeah.
And there were numerous covenants.
Correct.
And each one built upon
Correct.
the one that was before.
Yes, yes.
So what does it mean when it's said that we now have a new and better covenant? Does that mean all the others?
So the problem is the translation there. New implies the old is not good.
Right.
But a better translation would be refreshed. So the idea, think about a womb, because there's a lot of womb connection to all this. So you have a womb and it produces life. And as the womb ages, it shrivels and dies and it can't produce life anymore. But it doesn't mean it's over. The person's still alive doing whatever. So the idea of the covenant is being refreshed in that way. So it's not that the old one is no more and doesn't count and it's irrelevant. It's this refreshing of what was. And it brings you to a new place to once again produce life.
Right. Yeah, because for me, it was like the scripture that always came to mind was, and it just went right out of my head.
That's okay. That's we're having our senior moments.
Yeah. That God is not a man that he would lie.
Right.
Nor the son of man that he would turn.
Right.
And so he didn't get rid of the covenants before, because in my heart and in my mind is that if you say that you have a new covenant and the old has been done away with, then that is anti-Semitism.
Yeah. So you got to rethink refreshed versus what once was. Not that it's been replaced. This is not replacing. This is refreshing.
Yeah.
And really, all of the covenants go back to the very first covenant, which most people don't even know. What we call, what numbers of scholars call the creation covenant. So the first chapter of Genesis, because the very root word of a covenant or a brit is to cut.
Right.
So you cut. You have these two parties. And then when you put the parties back together, if you will, as one, it creates something new. So you see in Genesis 1 this sort of separating, right, between heaven and earth and day and night and light and dark and waters above and below. So you see this cutting, if you will. This is all covenant language. And then this restoring and on the seventh day to create something new, and the thing that's being created is, all of, the universe, if you will. So all covenants have a component of cutting, but the purpose is to take two parties, bring them together, and produce something new, something different, some kind of different existence.
And I think people here in New Mexico probably understand that within the First Nations.
Sure, absolutely.
because that's just such
probably better than a lot of us.
Yeah, because that happens.
All those, and so when you see like the ancient Indian cultures or the Japanese, Chinese, or Asian cultures understand all this much better than we do, because their cultures are closely tied, or more closely tied, to the ancient Near East world than we are. We're Western civilization, thousands of years past what the ancient world was like, but those cultures have still kept that.
Yeah.
So I find like my Chinese and Japanese students understand me, and actually this last round I had 2 students from Korea, and they understood it way better than everybody else because it's part of their culture.
Yeah. Interesting,
isn't it?
And we've got so much to learn and so much to let go of, and we're running out of time from this segment. But I want to encourage you, check out Dinah Dye, and you're on Amazon.
Yeah, you just go to Amazon.com and Dinah Dye, and there it is. All my books are there. It's
all right.
Very easy to find.
All right.
Yeah.
Awesome. And I just want to say something to you that if you've not said yes to the greatest gift of love ever given to mankind, Yeshua HaMashiach, call us. The number's on the bottom of the screen, and we've got prayer partners that will pray with you. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May He make His face to shine upon you. May He lift up His countenance upon you and give you His everlasting peace. Shalom, shalom.
Thank you for joining us today on God Answers Prayer. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on our program, please contact us by visiting kchftv.org and click on Share Your Testimony. Our prayer partners are here to pray for your needs. Call us today at 505-345-4165. We appreciate your prayers and support. Join us again next time for more inspiring stories and testimonies. Remember, God is always listening, and He answers our prayers in His perfect timing.